Here's an album that came to my attention just a few years ago. It is titled Synthesizing 10 Ragas to a Disco Beat by Indian electro raga musician Charanjit Singh. And some of these songs are kind of flow into one another. They're kind of similar. They all develop all electronic layers built around sequence beats. I'm going to play Raga Bhupali. Now already we've heard two sounds. We had that those really slow kind of open cadence intros with that just sort of fade in kind of trebly electronic sounds, and now we have this synth bass like forming an ostinato right here. Things coming out of each channel. We had that little tinkling bit coming out of this speaker, and now we have more coming out of this speaker. Okay, he's definitely overdubbing now. I was trying to imagine, is he playing both of those parts we were just hearing, one with each hand, like, and then a third part comes in, and he apparently did this whole thing himself. Yeah. It seems like each one of these tones is like a different, each one is a different tone in the sonic envelope, like ranging from really bassy to really trebly. It's like they're different like sonic waves, you know, like each one like oscillating differently, you know. I could only imagine like the 1982 video they could have come up for this music on the computer technology at the time. I reckon that the bass figure is a loop. That I don't think, because it's too exact. It's too uniform, too exact, too repetitive for him to just be going do 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 the whole time. I think it's the upper sounds that we're hearing that are being played live over that bass synth loop. Because that's more, because these lines up here are more individual. Yeah, like this. just kind of spirals up and back down and just winds around. I'm listening for other sounds besides that, like the main lead line, the upper register, and then the bass. Now I just heard like a tinkling sound coming out of the speaker. There had been other things going on besides those two main, but it's hard to even find them. It's like this whole thing just sweeps you along and won't let go. Now I'm hearing three things going on at once. I'm hearing two things going on over the bass. Something over here, something kind of whizzy over here, and then something more, kind of like, kind of almost like plucking, like a synth, like simulation of like pizzicato strings or something. Very little information given about this album. It just says composed by synthesizer Charanjit Singh, who was born in 1940 and passed away in 2015. Indian musician from Mumbai who performed in numerous Bollywood soundtrack orchestras during the 60s and 70s. Let's see. Oh yeah, the album, his album, he did all these soundtracks like instrumental film tunes, according to Discogs from 1974 onward, and then he put out this album in 1982 on his master's voice, which became popular in the 2000s when it was reissued and became and spread through DJ circles. And this is Raga Malkauns. C. C minor. Doing like this octave bass, it's going boom, boom, like octaves, like really low C, mid C, and then like going between those two, and then going from like one octave to the other, and then scaling back down. It's basically the ostinato. And that other sound is like spiraling around, that kind of whizzy sound spiraling around. It seems to be going from like this speaker to that speaker and back. And now something is coming out of that speaker too, something a little bit darker. Yeah, sounds are just kind of oozing out of here really slowly at irregular intervals. Okay, maybe I'm hearing four things at once. I'm hearing the ostinato, I'm hearing the spiraling that's going above it. I'm hearing the oozing, slow, subtle from the speaker. And I swear I'm hearing like a drone, like in C somewhere. I'm hearing like a consistent C note that's just being played throughout it, kind of faintly, subtly, but... And of course, I hear the beat too, but that's more felt than heard. Someone composes music like this. It's interesting. It's such a different process, I would imagine, than like as someone who used to play instruments myself, and knows like the rudiments of song construction. Like you find a theme and then you build something around it, and you take the theme and you juxtapose it against different key centers, and you come up with the movements that make up a composition. And this seems to just be, with this, I wonder what comes first. It's like they just lay down a rhythm track and begin to just layer sound on top, and then it all just forms into this. Yeah, it's amazing. I wonder if some of these bass ostinatos is where it begins. He hears like a bass pattern in his head, or a figure. I wonder if it all begins with the bass. That would make the most sense, really. Now we're hearing some really high, we've gone up another octave, and we've got some definite slow soloing going on here, as opposed to just like sound effects, which we were hearing mostly. I take it that the bass pattern is sequenced and is just playing on a repetitive loop. The whizzy sounds and the sounds that are just emanating from like this speaker or like that were, turning around, spiraling around, that would demonstrate his skills as a knob turner, as a knob fiddler. But the solo that we're hearing up in those upper keys, that's more a demonstration of his actual virtuosity as a keyboardist. Some pretty thick sounds coming through the middle now. That really, yeah, that those sounds that came through the middle towards like the final 45 seconds or so may have been the best part of the whole song. Almost vaguely harpsichord like synth sounds. No, not quite, but it's got that really glistening sonic quality. Anyway, that was Charanjit Singh, East Indian electro raga musician from his 1982 album, Synthesizing 10 Ragas to a Disco Beat. The tracks Raga Bhupali and Raga Malkauns. And sorry if I murdered any pronunciations there. And he played the whole thing himself, the whole album, and that's pretty much all the credit gives on Discogs. And I find it somewhat strange how not a lot of music seemed to have come from India during the 70s and 80s that made use of the higher meta maximalism. And what I mean by that is between like the tail end of the 60s and the mid 80s, there was a movement going on pretty much in just about all the rock appreciating countries anyway, of combining all the broader musics, classical, jazz, rock, and folk, into something greater than the sum of their parts. And of course, this would also manifest in somewhat splintered forms. You would have jazz rock, symphonic rock, folk rock. But there was oftentimes a lot of crossover, and there were thousands of bands, or so it seemed, around the world that were at the nexus of these different styles. You would have bands that were kind of jazz rock in orientation. With the occasional symphonic excursion, you would have bands that were more pop rock, foundationalist in nature, that would, work their way into symphonic territory at times. And there were bands that were, it was basically the post-Sgt. Pepper creative cycle that spread around the world. And there were bands in every country that's maximalism. It's like taking it's like moving beyond. It's like building beyond the foundations to something better than the sum of their parts. And there were bands that represented this movement in every country: Japan, Argentina, Brazil, South Africa, Zimbabwe, all of Europe, even Eastern Europe, the UK, of course, North America, Australia, New Zealand. And there wasn't much going on like in China and like the Caucasus region, much of the Middle East, for obvious reasons, because they were living under totalitarian dictatorships that precluded musical expression among the younger musicians of that generation, or any use of Western rock styles of any sort. And but India was reasonably democratic during that era, and had diplomatic relations with the UK. So I'm wondering why there wasn't more of like a development of like Indian music, Indian traditional music mixed with rock. There just doesn't seem to have been like much coming from India to compare to say like the stuff that was coming out of Turkey, like Andolan rock, I think it's called, where they mix like Turkish folk with Western rock and psychedelic music. It's something, or for that matter, like the mixture of rock and bossa nova that was going on, jazz rock and bossa nova that was going on in Brazil. These different regional areas of the world mixing Western rock, psych, symphonic rock with their own indigenous roots. Because it seems like something like that from India would be pretty yummy, actually. Mixing like raga, mixing sitars. And the other irony being is that India was the source of the very first, of the earliest exoticism to infuse rock. Because the whole trend of like Western rock musicians borrowing like motifs from the non-Anglosphere, folk instrumentation, ethnic elements from other parts of the world, all started with George Harrison's initial Indian influence, initial like raga influences that he started bringing into the Beatles on Norwegian Wood, and then like Tomorrow Never Knows. Bringing the sitar into the band, and that's what got the whole ball rolling. So India was like the first like non-Western influence on rock, and yet in India itself, it didn't really participate in the post-Pepper global creative explosion in the way that, say, like Japan, Brazil, and all these other non-English speaking countries did. It's kind of sad. I wish I could say otherwise. Anyway, and because of what I just went over right there, there's very little Indian music music from East India that could be described as being part of the maximal trilustrum. What I define as the 15-year time frame, roughly, in which the tenets of maximalism, of post-Pepper maximalism, were explored throughout the world, and therefore I don't have nearly enough albums from India to really merit doing an independent directory, and India is a bit too geographically removed from any of the regions that I have done directories for, so I don't have Indian artists collected under any directory right now. So for more rubies and sapphires from Charanjit Singh, see the directory of albums from 1982 in the linked in the description below. and like and subscribe. And until next time, this is Zaragon, the world's most ear-traveled tri-maximalist, signing off.